The world of cinema feels as if it has lost its heartbeat. Robert Redford, the symbol of a golden age. The man whose piercing blue eyes and thoughtful presence once mesmerized Hollywood has now departed this life on September 16, 2020, at the age of 89. He passed away peacefully in his sleep at his mountain retreat in Sundance, Utah, the very place that had become a refuge for the dreams of independent filmmakers. That light faded quietly, yet the emptiness it leaves behind echoes across the globe. For more than 50 years, Redford was never only an actor. He was a defier of norms, a force who guided Hollywood into a new direction, where beauty meant more than a charming face. It lived in the soul of characters and the fire of storytelling. In his later years, as his health weakened, he chose to withdraw from the spotlight, leaving behind solemn reflections that aging and sickness were far harsher than any role he had embraced. And now, as the heartbreaking news travels, we witness a painful irony. The man who once embodied both allure and belief in cinema concluded his path in sorrowful solitude. Beyond the shimmer of fame, there remained only a spirit longing for rest. If you ever admired him, share a comment saying, "Rest in peace." Robert Redford as a final goodbye to the man who gave his whole life to timeless stories. And now let us walk into the real journey of Robert Redford to see whether a legend could ever truly find joy who held his deepest affection. What did he surrender to become an everlasting star? And in the end, did Redford leave this earth with questions left unresolved? Before his rise as a Hollywood icon, Robert Redford was simply a boy from Santa Monica, California. He was raised in a modest home with a father who worked as an accountant and a mother devoted to caring for the family. Though his neighborhood was ordinary, Robert always sensed he was different. He loved creativity, sports, and the outdoors, but cared little for academics. After a short time at the University of Colorado, where he lost his scholarship because of drinking and poor results, Robert entered a troubled stage, uncertain of what direction his life would take during this struggle. He encountered Lola Van Wagenen, a young woman of gentle beauty and unshakable spirit. Lola came from Provo, Utah. She had been raised in a traditional Mormon household in Provo, where the values of morality and family were deeply rooted. The difference between Robert's wandering spirit and Lola's steadiness drew them together in a way that neither could resist. Robert felt that Lola could ground his restless heart, while Lola was drawn to his fiery passion and untamed outlook. Only a year later, in 1958, and despite fierce objections from Lola's relatives, they chose to run away together. Their wedding carried no glamour yet. It overflowed with love and belief in the life they hoped to create. For Robert, it was a vow that he would do whatever he could to give Lola a brighter future. Once married, Robert and Lola began their life as partners, filled with hope and determination, yet reality soon revealed itself to be harsher than they expected. Robert, still searching for a place in the world of entertainment, accepted different small jobs just to keep them going. They lived in cramped apartments, their modest income barely enough to cover their daily needs. Each night, Robert lay awake, weighed down by thoughts of what lay ahead and clinging to the dream that one day he would rise as an artist. At the same time, Lola devoted her days to holding their home together, working to keep order so that their lives would not unravel. Although Lola had been raised with comfort and privilege, she never once complained about the struggles or the lack they endured. She faced every obstacle with quiet strength, believing in Robert's ability and urging him to keep pursuing his vision. For her success was only a matter of time, and she was ready to sacrifice and wait patiently for that moment. In 1959, inside their modest apartment, Robert and Lola welcomed their first child, a baby boy named Scott. For them, he was a light in the darkness, a blessing that embodied the deep love between them. Every sound, every tiny smile from their little one brightened the difficult path they were walking. Yet their joy was heartbreakingly brief. Only 3 months after his birth, tragedy struck when Scott died. Suddenly in his sleep from sudden infant death syndrome, a condition still unexplained by medicine even today. The loss crushed them both. Robert, though accustomed to hardship, was left helpless, drowning in a sorrow he could not escape. Yet Lola did not break. With her quiet resilience, she became the steady force holding her grieving husband together. She reminded Robert that they could not undo what had happened, but they could decide how to move forward. It was Lola's steady nature and inner strength that slowly helped Robert rise from the weight of his grief. Together, they chose not to let tragedy be the only story of their lives. After time passed and healing began, Robert and Lola carried on with hope, believing that life still had gifts waiting for them. In 1960, their first daughter, Shauna, was born. Her arrival filled their home with joy and renewed their faith. 2 years later, in 1962, they welcomed James, a bright-eyed boy with a smile that mirrored his father's. And in 1970, the family was completed with the birth of their youngest, Amy, a spirited and vibrant child. Each of the children became a symbol of renewal after the sorrow they had faced. Yet the shadow of losing Scott never fully faded. Every celebration, every step their children took reminded Robert and Lola of the baby they could not save. In those early years as parents, they poured all their love and care into raising their children with dedication. Robert, even, as his career began to demand more and more from him, made sure to spend time with his family. Lola remained the heart of their home, providing warmth and stability so the children could grow in love. Shauna chose a creative life of her own, becoming an artist. She found her path in painting far removed from the attention of Hollywood. For her art was both a way to connect with the world and a shield to keep distance from her father's fame. She later married, built a family with 2 children, and lived a calm life that Robert cherished deeply. James, their second son, reflected Robert's strength and creative drive. He chose to follow his father's path by becoming a filmmaker and also an advocate for the environment. James was not only a talented storyteller through film, but also a leader in projects that spread awareness about clean energy and organ donation. Yet sorrow struck once again. In 2020, James died at the age of 58 after battling liver cancer, leaving a space in Robert's heart that could never be filled. Amy, the youngest of the children, continued the artistic heritage of the family, working as both a director and actress. She appeared at the Sundance Film Festival, the very event her father had established, proving that her skill was honored on its own beyond the shadow of his reputation. As already said, James Redford was more than a source of pride for Robert. He was the natural successor to his artistic vision and his sense of social duty. James possessed determination, creativity, and a heart full of devotion. Even so, his admirable path was cut short in painful tragedy, leaving a scar that would never heal for his parents. His struggles began back in the 1990s when doctors found he had a rare liver condition that demanded 2 transplants to keep him alive. Through those grueling years, Robert stayed at his son's side, carrying the quiet terror of losing yet another child but never revealing his fear. Robert once admitted that watching your child suffer while being powerless to help is the most painful feeling for a father. James not only survived his illness, but transformed his struggle into a drive for change. He created the Redford Foundation to spread knowledge about organ donation, and he produced many documentaries focused on protecting the environment and improving public health. Still, the complications from his earlier condition eventually led to liver cancer, which crept back quietly, and this time offered no escape. In October 2020, shortly after Robert marked his 84th birthday, The family was struck by heartbreaking news. James' health had worsened drastically, the cancer had advanced, and no treatment could save him. In those final days, James stayed close to his loved ones with his wife, his 2 children, and his parents by his side. Robert did everything possible to be near him, determined to make up for the times when work had kept them apart. Later in an interview, Robert shared that James never once complained about the pain. Instead, he accepted it as simply part of existence. Robert said he had never known anyone with strength like his son. Even as his final days drew near, James kept his smile. Alive, he spoke with his father about the projects he wished to finish, as if he wanted to leave behind encouragement for his family to carry on his mission. James passed on October 16, 2020, only 2 months after Robert's birthday. His passing struck the family with crushing force. Even though they had long prepared themselves, Robert still felt helpless and resentful at the cruelty of destiny. In that painful moment, he understood that he had now lost both his sons. Scott, the baby taken so young, and James, the accomplished man, so full of energy and love for life. In a letter written to relatives and friends, Robert revealed that James was not only his son, but also someone he truly admired. He wrote that James had lived with purpose and that nothing in his life had made him prouder. Yet he admitted that no words could ever capture the depth of his grief. After losing James, Robert devoted himself to continuing the causes his son had cared for, especially through the Redford Foundation and the Sundance Film Festival. He saw this as a way to carry James forward, not just in the hearts of family, but in the larger community he had served with passion. Robert once said that James had not really gone because he lived through what he had created, and he promised to guard his legacy so it would never be forgotten. If the loss of Scott had been the first scar, then the passing of James tore that wound wider, compelling Robert Redford to once again face the unbearable weight of sorrow. He once confided, as a parent, you always hope to protect your children, yet sometimes you are powerless, and that helplessness is the hardest truth to accept. Through the many rises and falls of Robert Redford's life, it was Lola Van Wagenen who held the family together. She was not only a dedicated mother, but also a constant source of strength for Robert during years marked by pressure and loss. While Robert often spent long stretches away for his career, Lola carried the weight of raising their children, making sure they grew surrounded by love and stability. She knew well the heavy demands that came with her husband's fame and work. Yet instead of bearing it in silence, she chose to encourage him to keep chasing his creative vision. Whenever Robert faced obstacles, Lola became his confidant, the one who listened and guided him through both personal trials and the heartbreak of losing family. She often said that family was the true foundation of life, and it was this belief that allowed her to preserve unity in their home, even during moments when everything threatened to break apart. During the long periods when Robert was away on film sets or engaged in large projects, Lola managed everything, alone, from raising the children to facing daily struggles. She was more than a mother. She was the anchor that kept the family grounded through every storm. Yet carrying that role brought its own difficulties. Her constant devotion and sacrifice helped the family survive tragedies, but at times left her feeling unseen and lonely. Even though Robert and Lola faced many challenges side by side, their marriage eventually could not endure the strain of his career. As his fame soared through the 1970s, the distance between him and home widened. His long absences, his relentless dedication to work, and the bright lure of Hollywood slowly created cracks in their bond. In 1985, after 27 years of marriage, Robert and Lola chose to divorce. It was not filled with bitterness, but it was a painful choice they felt necessary. Robert later admitted that in chasing his career so intensely, he had failed to give enough of himself to his family. Yet even after separating, they kept a close friendship and shared the responsibility of raising their children with unwavering care. After the divorce, Lola turned her focus toward building her own path. She pursued higher learning, earned a doctorate in history at New York University, and rose as a committed social activist. She co-founded the nonprofit Consumer Action Now and took part in efforts that promoted protection of the environment and equality for women. Lola grew into a powerful voice in bringing attention to social issues and human rights. At the same time, Robert tried his best to keep the family united. Their children, Shauna, James, and Amy, remained a living reflection of the love and effort he and Lola had shared. Robert often spoke openly of the depth of Lola's devotion, calling her the true love of his life in many interviews. He described her as the strength that held him steady during the hardest seasons of his journey. What do you feel when you see a family that stood firm for nearly 30 years, ultimately unable to withstand the pressures of fame and time? Share your thoughts below as we keep exploring this story. After 27 years of marriage with Lola came to an end, Robert Redford began a new phase in life. Though no longer bound by marriage, he carried with him the emotional burdens and responsibilities of the past. Facing the emptiness left by the divorce, he turned toward new relationships, each leaving its own mark on his path. In 1987, while working on the film The Milagro Beanfield War, Robert met Brazilian actress Sônia Braga. With her radiant charm and lively energy, Sônia became impossible for him to resist. Their romance quickly drew attention, and when they appeared together at the Cannes Film Festival, the pair caused a stir. In Sônia, Robert discovered not only a shared artistic spirit, but also a contagious joy for life. Yet like a fire burning too fast, their passion flared brilliantly, only to fade within. A short time, less than a year later, they separated, leaving Robert with memories that sparkled but did not last. 3 years later, in 1990, Robert worked with Swedish actress Lena Olin on the film Havana. Their bond began on set through the intensity of the film's emotional scenes. Lena, with her graceful beauty and remarkable acting, stirred in Robert both creative and romantic emotions. Their connection grew beyond the screen as they exchanged honest thoughts and feelings. Yet, as happens with many Hollywood romances, theirs did not endure. Differences in lifestyle and the constant pressure of fame eventually brought their relationship to a gentle end. Around that same period, Robert also grew close to Cathy O'Rear, a costume designer. Unlike his previous companions, Cathy was not a public figure, but her humility and steady presence gave Robert a sense of balance in the difficult years after his divorce. Cathy was not just a partner in love, she was also a steady friend who helped him find calm when the chaos of Hollywood offered none. Still, this relationship too did not last, and in time, they chose separate paths. Robert's relationships after parting from Lola were never long-lasting, but each one carried its own, meaning each offered something unique that helped him move through the sorrow of a broken marriage and guided him step by step toward rediscovering peace. Every woman who entered his life left behind a distinct influence, guiding him to explore new sides of love and connection. Even though he did not find lasting stability, these relationships became valuable chapters in the personal journey of a legend. They helped him manage the emotional storm that followed his divorce and also deepened his understanding of love and life beyond romance. Robert Redford built strong ties with many of his co-stars' relationships grounded in trust and professional admiration. Among these, Jane Fonda and Candice Bergen shone brightly as two women whose impact on his life was unforgettable, though in very different ways. One of his most remarkable bonds was with Jane Fonda, his longtime partner on screen. Together, they created timeless classics like Barefoot in the Park and The Electric Horseman. Jane openly confessed that she had fallen for Robert while they worked alongside each other. Her feelings were not only for his handsome presence, but also for his skilled dedication and steady character. Yet despite this affection, their connection never crossed into romance. Robert held her in the highest regard, and their friendship stayed sincere, untouched by gossip or the dazzle of Hollywood. Another link that stirred curiosity was with Candice Bergen, his co-star in The Hunting Party, with her striking beauty and quick wit. Candice was rumored to share a romance with Robert away from the screen. Yet neither ever admitted to such stories, and if there was any truth, it seemed to be short-lived. Although whispers about Candice and Robert drew heavy interest from the press, they carried little effect on his career or personal path. After a trail of short but memorable connections, Robert Redford moved into a fresh chapter of life, finding calm beside a woman who helped him endure the storms of his past. His encounter with Sibylle Szaggars, a German artist, did not happen in Hollywood circles or at glamorous galas, but rather in a far humbler place, the Sundance Resort, which Robert had created as a retreat where people could unite with nature and art. When Robert first crossed paths with Sibylle, he was in search of balance after the strain of personal loss and the weight of his career. Sibylle, an environmental artist, had arrived at Sundance to present her creations. To her, Robert was not a movie legend, but a reflective soul who cherished both art and the natural world. Robert felt an instant pull toward Sibylle's purity and genuineness. Unlike past companions, Sibylle showed no interest in the dazzle of stardom. Instead, she carried empathy and a deep spiritual bond. She once revealed that before meeting Robert, she had viewed several of his films to know him better. Yet it did not change her vision of him as simply a man rather than an untouchable celebrity. This honesty gave Robert comfort and space to be his truest self with her. After more than 10 years of sharing life, Robert and Sibylle chose to officially unite. In 2009, they celebrated a modest wedding in Hamburg, Germany, her hometown. The event lacked famous guests or glaring spotlights, centering instead on an intimate circle of dear friends and family. For them, this day marked not just a ritual, but a beginning of a fresh journey, a bond grounded in equality and shared care. Sibylle grew into more than a spouse for Robert. She became a vital partner in his creative and environmental missions. Together, they launched The Way of the Rain, a project uniting art with ecological advocacy to spread awareness on climate change. Within these performances, Sibylle directs the vision while Robert contributes his gift of narrative to move and awaken audiences. Their collaboration was more than artistic expression. It became a bridge linking them to each other and to the broader world. Robert often expressed that Sibylle gifted him a renewed spirit, a life freed from the crushing weight of celebrity and public judgment. With her, he feels understood, supported, and connected through their shared devotion to art, nature, and social responsibility. Together, they built a life centered not on fame, but on purpose, harmony, and shared values. At 88, Robert Redford has embraced serenity beside Sibylle Szaggars. Their main home rests in Sundance, Utah, near the famed Sundance Mountain Resort founded by Robert. They also retreat to Santa Fe, New Mexico, a place they treasure for its landscapes and artistic vibrancy. Their days now revolve around creative pursuits, quiet living, and ecological advocacy through The Way of the Rain. Robert rarely steps onto film sets or into grand events. Instead, he channels his energy into painting a lifelong passion and supporting environmental causes and nonprofits. Sibylle continues her path as an environmental artist, showing her work across the globe. She not only urges Robert to follow his own passions, but also partners with him on projects that matter deeply. For them, existence is no longer about ambition, but about cherishing what they have achieved and ensuring a positive legacy. Robert calls this chapter peaceful yet alive. He stays engaged without craving fame. Yet even in stillness, sorrow lingers. The deaths of his sons, Scott and James, remain wounds too deep to mend. Robert confides that comfort comes from Sibylle, who listens, shares, and helps carry his grief. She became more than a companion. She became a muse inspiring Robert to embrace life with depth and purpose. Together, they move through their later years hand in hand with love and with a duty to safeguard the environment, uplift the arts, and leave behind enduring value. If family and love offered Robert healing, then his career became the canvas where he transformed pain into art. His rise was not simply about celebrity, but about resilience, daring to defy convention and shaping his own destiny. Robert Redford entered the world on August 18, 1936, in Santa Monica, California. His roots lay in a modest working-class household as the nation still reeled from the shadows of the Great Depression. His father, Charles Redford, worked steadily as an accountant for Standard Oil, providing stability, though never luxury. His mother, Martha Hart, was the spirit of the home, gentle yet firm and unwavering in her belief that her son was meant for greatness. From a young age, Robert showed little spark for academics, often restless and distracted. Yet with a pencil in hand sketching or out on the field in sports, he transformed into a different boy, driven, fiery, unstoppable. But childhood brought sorrow early. In 1945, when Robert was only 9 years old, Redford was only 8, when his uncle was killed in the Battle of the Bulge. To Robert, this uncle was far more than kin. He was a hero, an athlete of rare talent, fluent in 4 languages, daring and unafraid. His death became the boy's first harsh lesson in how fragile life truly is. 3 years later, at 11, Robert awoke unable to move, his eyes heavy, his body frozen. Doctors declared it polio. 2 endless weeks trapped in bed were pure torment for a child always in motion. Though his body healed, the memory of being caged inside weakness scarred him with the knowledge that existence hangs by a thread. Then came 1955. At 18, Redford lost his mother, who died at only 40 from complications in pregnancy. This was not only the death of a parent. It was the loss of the one who had believed in him without pause. He later confessed, "My mother always believed I could do something even when I doubted myself." Her passing forced him into silence, a silence that later emerged in his art as hidden depth. These repeated blows carved into him a restless fire, a hunger to defy expectation and craft his own fate. At Van Nuys High School, he drew attention not for academics, but for sports and his rebellious spirit with a baseball scholarship. Redford entered the University of Colorado, but instead of focusing on athletics, he dove into drinking, wild parties, and reckless joyrides. A near-fatal car crash warned him he was racing toward ruin. Eventually, he lost his scholarship and was expelled. At 19, he was adrift, no degree, no direction. Yet that collapse opened a new door. He left America, roaming across Europe, studying painting in Florence, scraping by with illustration work, and drifting through Paris. In poverty, he discovered freedom and fragments of his artistic soul. Returning to the United States, Redford enrolled at the American Academy of Dramatic Arts in New York. There he learned to master his voice, his movements, and to mold his wounds into raw material for performance. His Broadway debut came with Tall Story, but it was in 1963 that he truly emerged in Neil Simon's Barefoot in the Park. As Paul Bratter, the earnest young lawyer, Redford was witty, magnetic, and achingly sincere. Every night, the theater, filled to the brim, etching his name into the New York stage, Hollywood soon beckoned. By the mid-60s, Redford had crossed into film in Inside Daisy Clover, and this property is condemned. Opposite Natalie Wood, he shaped the image of a romantic drifter cloaked in quiet sorrow. His true breakthrough arrived with Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. As the Sundance Kid alongside Paul Newman, Redford became immortal. The film elevated him from rising actor to international icon, and Sundance became his lasting moniker. Through the 70s, his roles carried sharp social weight. Jeremiah Johnson embodied solitude in the wild. The candidate revealed political corruption. The Way We Were delivered a bittersweet romance with Barbra Streisand, and The Sting conquered the box office while earning him an Oscar nod for Best Actor. Unafraid of change, he brought tension to 3 Days of the Condor and engraved his name into cinematic history with All the President's Men dramatizing Watergate, with Dustin Hoffman. No longer just a star, he became a voice for a generation weary of decline. In the 80s, he held audiences again with Brubaker and Out of Africa opposite Meryl Streep, a sweeping epic of love. By then, he stood as the archetype of the last great movie, Man Rugged Yet Tender. His magnetism endured in Sneakers, Indecent Proposal, Spy Game and All Is Lost, a near-silent tour de force of survival. His closing role in The Old Man and the Gun in 2018 was a graceful farewell. Bringing his journey from Sundance Kid to elder statesman full circle, yet Redford's impact stretched beyond acting. He turned director and stunned with Ordinary People, exposing hidden family anguish and winning the Academy Award for Best Director. A River Runs Through It made a Montana stream a metaphor for life, while Quiz Show laid bare television fraud. With The Horse Whisperer, he merged nature and trauma, and in films like The Legend of Bagger Vance and Lions for Lambs, he probed truth, scars, and conscience. Praised or criticized, his works carried one spirit: the pursuit of honesty. Most transformative was his creation of the Sundance Institute in 1981. From a modest workshop, it grew into the Sundance Film Festival, cradle of independent cinema launching voices such as Quentin Tarantino, Steven Soderbergh, Darren Aronofsky, and Chloe Zhao. For Redford, it was never only about movies. It was about fairness, about giving fragile, authentic stories room to breathe. In every form, actor, director, producer, founder, he leaned toward restraint, a glance instead of a speech, silence instead of excess. He stood as the essence of subtlety, an artist willing to resist the tide illuminating screens with the scars of his own journey. Because of this, Robert Redford was never just a Hollywood name. He was a cultural force, a storyteller with unshaken will whose legacy spans far beyond applause. Redford was more than a legend of 6 decades in film. He was a man tempered by grief and lifted by resilience. He carried soaring triumphs and crushing losses, losing 2 sons yet finding peace with a second wife and meaning in art and stewardship. His mark extended beyond cinema into society and nature, which he fiercely loved. He personified a generation of artists unwilling to settle, determined to let art shine into the fractured corners of human life. From the charm of the Sundance Kid to the resolve of Bob Woodward, from directing films about hidden family sorrows to birthing the Sundance Film Festival. Nurturing countless new voices, Redford proved that cinema could serve as conscience, healing ground, and beacon. He offered thousands of young filmmakers a chance, gave platform to small but mighty stories, and forever altered Hollywood's face. Today, when people recall Redford, they see not just the actor with striking blue eyes, but the patient craftsman who stepped aside so others could rise, the man who retreated to Utah's mountains to build a haven where cinema could breathe. He embodied the truth that legends are forged not only in applause, but in the enduring values they plant for people, for art, and for the world. The death of Robert Redford at 89 brings to an end a radiant era of American cinema, leaving countless hearts in mourning. He departed in quiet dignity, yet his roles, his films, and the artistic institutions he founded still echo through time. Hollywood has lost a star, yet the world keeps a cultural symbol, one who proved that beauty resides not only in appearance, but in the unwavering chase of truth and integrity. Perhaps the most sorrowful thought is that those piercing blue eyes will never again appear on the big screen. And precisely for that reason, each frame of his films, each story he left behind takes on sacred meaning. Robert Redford poured his entire being into art, and now leaves us with a silence more profound than ovations. In that silence, we grieve not only for a man, but also bow before an immortal icon? Do you still carry a memory of Robert Redford that touched your soul the most? Was it the fearless gaze in Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid? The tender smile in The Way We Were? Or the sheer endurance in All Is Lost? Share your memory in the comments, so together we can keep the flame of Robert Redford alive in our shared remembrance.